Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are in Colorado and coming back to a site that I kind of have already been to a little piece of. You might remember these views. However, we have something else that we did not do when we were here, and today we're here to do it. So does this look familiar? Well, whenever we were traveling previous on this particular trip, I stopped over here as I went from the Salida area to Canon City. And this is a wonderful pull-off, but it's one of many that they actually have in this area. But at this one, I discovered something kind of special that's up by the van. And that was this. The pathway into history. This particular area has the Valley Bridge and goes all the way up toward the Salida area. Now there is one section that we won't be able to do today because it requires four-wheel drive. But as you can see, you can travel along this little section here and see the Howard Cemetery and then go all the way up into the Swissvale area and then also up to the railroad and Wellsville. Now in this section there are 12 signs that are kind of like this that tell you more about the area. And I think that's really cool that they have this little county road that explains the history of the area. You know me, I like brain wrinkles. And for those of you who are new, that's what my channel is all about. Learning about the past so we can make better tomorrows, all the while encouraging us to live life more fully. So let's explore this sign and get a little taste as to kind of what this area was, and then also kind of figure out what is to come as we proceed down this road. Now on this sign we'll find some historic photos, including this one, which was in Main Street, Canon City at one point in time. You can see the covered wagons that were there, and they were ready to serve up the gold and silver mines of the Leadville area. So they would pack up in the low ground and then head on toward the high ground, which was a considerable distance away, especially in this particular manner. Here we also have Canon City Main Street between 2nd and 3rd, and you can see a driver of a stagecoach with 6 horses. And they would actually run this stage line between Canon City and also the Salida area. Now, as we're standing here, it also encourages us to think about those who came before us. For example, Zebulon Pike. Pike, of course, is who Pikes Peak is named after. It says here that he actually camped along this pathway at least 2 times that they have recorded. And so that was a person who was a pioneer to this area and definitely made a lot of interesting discoveries in his seeking out of knowledge. But on this particular trip, he was actually trying to get to the Royal Gorge and learn a little bit more. So that's pretty cool. We're really close to the Royal Gorge whenever we're here. And in fact, the very waters that we've kind of been going along, they coast and have melded into the canyons and turned the Royal Gorge into what it is today. So it's kind of fascinating to see that not only was he here for the Royal Gorge, but he also went on to be known for the Colorado Springs area kind of as a whole with Pikes Peak. But in addition to Pike, it tells us to look at the settlers who were here in the areas. And despite the fact that now you might see homes in this region, the first settlers actually came and stayed in canvas tents. And now those tents look more similar to backpacking tents, as this is a very popular corridor for backpacking. So with that said, it is now time for us to head down this road right here and learn a little bit more. Now, according to that sign, it said that from the beginning of this until the very end, including that four-wheel drive section that could be covered in water, it is approximately 10 miles. So as we're kind of going through here, you're seeing tons of different kinds of plants. You can see the mountains kind of in the distance. You can see, again, homes along this road. It's not all so different from any other Colorado road, but this one particular path kind of paved the way for travel through this region, which is pretty interesting. Now there is a highway that sits and runs almost directly beside it that you more regularly would use, and it is much more well maintained than this one, which is more of like a dirt road with some gravel. But I'm looking for our next sign right now. Oh, this is interesting. As we're on this road, it says that there is a railroad track, but I think you can see there's the track. It hasn't been used in quite some time, it looks like. Not the sign we were looking for, but a stop along this way, and you can see there's a little parking area here, and then you can actually kind of walk into that section over there. But what I found more interesting, and the reason I pulled off at this one, is you can actually see the railroad that ran through here at one point in time that was the functional railroad. You can see now there's a bunch of plants growing up in it, and as you continue going down, it just kind of disappears into the plants. Now, much like the stagecoach or much like the covered wagons that we saw, the railroad became instrumental to this area. And we learned a little bit more about how some of those stagecoaches and also those wagons were replaced by the railroad whenever we were in Leadville. In fact, when the boom happened there, they had to be able to move things off of the mountain much more quickly to be more productive. And their season was not as nice toward those who had to navigate it in those more primitive means. So the highway system started out that way, and then also the train system really took off that way. So now as you move through these areas, you get to see the remnants of the old trains. But they still do have more modern ones, but a lot of the older trains have now been decommissioned and turned into more tourist rides than anything. But you will still find regular trains, just not on these tracks. A lot of times when they put these tracks together, they realized that they weren't necessarily the best to navigate in these areas. For example, as we get a little closer to Canon City, we noticed that some of those tracks had been completely abandoned, and the reason why is because they were having frequent derailments because of the structure and also the way that they would have to curve through the mountains. This is probably along the same lines, if not the exact same line, which was the Rio Grande. Okay, we made it to our second stop on the pathway into history, and here we learn about the kiln industry and how it fueled the economy. And we learned that this is considered to be the Valley of the Kilns. In fact, in 1889, Denver and Rio Grande Railroad map shows 6 different charcoal kilns altogether were located near the Howard area. And they actually have a little map here, and so you can see kind of what that corridor might have looked like. You can see the Arkansas River, which we were just looking at, and then you can see some various little kilns along the way, which would have been located on that side of the road over there where the mountain is. And it says here that those served a very big part of the railroad industry. See, they needed to be able to quickly load and unload trains, and the best way to do this was to move those things closer to the railways. Like we were talking about, the railways were the way to get things done much faster than the manual means of like the horse and buggy. So having the kilns so close by, putting them right up next to the area that was serviced right down here where we could see the rail line, was such an important thing. But there were a lot of different kinds of kilns that were actually located in this area, and it talks a little bit more about how they were made and then also what they did. For example, here on the top we see a lime kiln versus a charcoal kiln, and the charcoal kiln has more of a dome hive shape, and we can see here kind of how it worked. So they would use pinion logs, and then they would have a vent on both the sides, a charcoal door, and then a loading area, and then you could see what one of these might have looked like. And this is the tracks right here beside that one. Now the difference is the lime kilns were more rectangular, and they were more shoved up into the mountain itself, and you could see these also standing very near the tracks of the railways, but they would be a square shape. Now in the case of the lime, the powdered lime was what was actually loaded onto the rail carts as opposed to the big chunks of it. But with the charcoal, they wanted the bigger pieces, they wanted the chunks. So that was kind of another kind of interesting thing that I thought I wanted to share with you all, because I thought it was kind of fascinating. Now, what did they use these things for is the next question. Well, lime was used for plaster and cement. So limestone would then become plaster and cement, which could be used in a variety of applications for building and construction. But the other side of that was the charcoal, which was actually used as fuel. And they needed this for the smelters up in Leadville. Because of the mining industry, it was non-stop. They needed this kind of fuel. So both of these things were super important. So the train would pick it up and then it would take it all the way to Leadville in a much faster time. Now, the mining industry did a lot for a lot of people. It brought people to the area for jobs. It also made a lot of people super wealthy. But with that also came a lot of hardship. And I kind of learned the last time I was up in Leadville about some of the hardships that some of the people went through whenever the mining industry went bust. And it was pretty unfortunate. Now, at one point in time, there were over 3,000 Irish immigrants specific to that area. And even to this day, Leadville is known for its immigrant population. There's a lot of different kinds of people there, which is kind of cool. But I just thought it was pretty interesting that even all these miles away, that here it was a part of the preparation process for what was going on there in that mining community. But we're not done yet. That's only 2 signs. We got a ways to go. I will say this, guys, the road's getting a little mushy because it's been raining, so we'll see how far this goes. But I found the next sign, and it looks like there's more rain coming. So we're gonna try to get this finished. If we can't, then I'm gonna challenge you guys to come out here and finish it, because the history of this area is so cool. Now, this one is actually talking about the Howard Cemetery, which I just passed. It's on the right-hand side whenever you come up this way. And it talks about some of the unique gravestones here that are located at the Howard Cemetery. So, first and foremost, let's check those out. It says here, gravestones reveal diverse family character and beliefs as well as economic conditions. And in 2000, the Western Fremont Historical Society, assisted by the Howard Cemetery Association and the Cotopaxi High School National Honor Society, conducted a cemetery survey using an old cemetery map. Now, despite this being a smaller cemetery, they found that there were at least 35 military veterans that were buried in the cemetery, some dating all the way back to the Civil War. So that was kind of a neat little thing, but there's a little bit more on this sign. Now, this was the most interesting. This says that the Howard Cemetery Association actually applied to purchase the land for the cemetery from the General Land Office, and they bought it for only $25. They picked up 20 acres for only $25. Now, that wasn't until like the 1900s though. There are people who are buried here from before that, and I thought that that was pretty fascinating. So the cemetery itself was already in place, but they had to officially like found it as a cemetery association and put it on record, which was kind of cool. Also, there is hope. This big guy is going on this road, so maybe we'll be able to get up there a little bit further. Now, this man right here, Leander Maines, he was actually the man who was the contributing founder of the Howard Cemetery Association and was its president at one point in time and served for about 30 years. Of course, cemeteries tell the fabric of our communities, so there are so many people with interesting stories buried in local cemeteries. Now, today we're not going to go over to the Howard Cemetery. I'm going to let that be something that you can explore if you're interested, but there are some headstones on here that you can actually go and find yourself, and those are some of the veterans, so I thought that that was pretty neat. But with that said, we're going to try to beat this rain and get back on this kind of muddy road. Please don't let us get stuck today. That is not on my bingo card at all. Okay, you can see where I came off the road. Definitely moist here, but guess what, guys? There's our next sign. A community is born, and here we see some of the different people who homesteaded in this region, and also a little map of the communities. This was from 1882, and it is a map of the Pleasant Valley area, and it shows several of the homes, the post office, and the school. So here you can see Stout, Latham, Peregrine, and Amy on the map. But on this part, we actually learn about who those people were, and their stories are pretty fascinating. So it says here that Amy Homestead was Sanford Amy, and he arrived in Pleasant Valley in 1874. And I believe that this is actually the Amy Homestead right here in this historic photo. It says that he decided that he was going to settle upriver from Jonah Peregrine, which is this man right here. And then he later went on and sold that claim to the Freeman brothers, who moved up to Flint Creek. Mr. Peregrine was actually a Welshman. He was an immigrant that came here, and he really liked to prospect for minerals. And so that's what really drew him into the area. And so he homesteaded in an area, and he really enjoyed this particular Pleasant Valley area because of the proximity to his hobby of looking for those minerals. It actually goes on to say also that he was an agricultural person who used his income to provide basically some funding for his mining activities. Mr. Peregrine was the first settler to this area, so everybody who came after followed in his footsteps. And he selected this area again because of the mineral content that they had, and because of the lush ability to have agriculture thanks to the water. So I thought that that was kind of an interesting little tidbit. But let's talk about some of the other families, like these two. Now this is William and Hattie Latham, and Latham was actually a book salesman. He met and married Hattie, who was the granddaughter of Aaron West, and they took out a claim along the West Creek. He was considered to be an accomplished musician and also part of the church. And then this little homestead right here belonged to William Stout and his wife and 3 children, who all settled here in the fall of 1872. Now Stout was considered to be an accomplished dairyman, but can you imagine coming here during the fall? It's probably beautiful, only to then have the winter follow that. And oh my gosh, if you can make it through that, you can make it through anything. But through this sign, we also learn about how, since they were more isolated, what it meant to build a home and educate the community, and communicating beyond the valley itself whenever it was first created, and how the community began to spring up and grow as a whole, even with these factors. See, we have our own set of challenges today, but communicating with the outside world is typically not one of them, because we can either get in a car and go somewhere or pick up a phone of some kind. However, none of that really existed then. So once you were here, you were here until you needed to go somewhere else, in which case it was an endeavor. You would have to pack for multiple days just to go to the largest town like near you. It wouldn't be just like oh, I'm gonna go and in 20 minutes I'll be there. It was, I'm gonna go and clock me 4 or 5 days and maybe I'll get there. So that was kind of the struggle of settling in this beautiful valley. But still, they rose to the occasion, and as a result of that, people still to this day live here. So they definitely were on to something. But we're not finished yet. We're gonna keep going down the somewhat sketchy road and see what else we can learn. The road improved. That's nice. Oh no, as it improved, it started to sprinkle again. Oh, just let us get through a little bit more of this, please. I want to show the people all the cool stuff. Well, that was short-lived. It's raining and we're back on the weird road again. Good times. Okay, as we came into town and it started raining, we found this sign, and this has a lot of historic photos on here, so we're going to kind of talk about them as a whole. Now this one talks about Howard circa 1900, and then also the present, and this is the old Howard town site right here. And this was taken looking south and southwest toward the mountain range, and this was approximately 1922 when this photo was taken. And then also you can look here, and here is a view approximately 1910. And then this is the mail right here. It says passengers, mail, and freight all pass through this station for more than 50 years. And then here is the old Howard Church, which actually was around quite early on also. Now Howard today looks a lot different than Howard of the past, but you can still see the little footprint of some of those same buildings, which is kind of interesting. And you can see on this side we have a town hall, and directly across from it is the church site, which was actually featured in this photo. So it's the same church site, which is kind of cool. So let's take a little bit of a look around, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the history of Howard. So here we have the town hall. It's a bit more modern. They have an outdoor space for gathering, but also an indoor space. And then right across from that, there is the church today. And so that's a pretty neat building to have this historic photo of, but also to have still having access to right here. Now, like so many communities that have grown and changed, a lot of the older buildings are still present. However, you wouldn't necessarily recognize them because they've been altered, or potentially some of them have changed their purpose just a little bit. For example, some of the buildings that we see now are residences, but might have been businesses in the past. And so it's kind of fascinating to see. And this is a smaller community, but also a very interesting, cute little community with a big past. And I think that that's all very clearly spelled out thanks to these signs. So since we're about to hit rain, I'm going to leave the remainder of this trip for you guys to kind of enjoy, because I'm about to get poured on, guys. But I thought this was an interesting way to kind of learn about this area and see how it kind of relates to some of the other places that we go. I'm not as familiar with this part of Colorado, so taking little trips like this definitely tell the story of how everything connects. And what have I said a million times on the channel? If you go to one place and then you go to another place, you'll find out they're not so far apart. In fact, they tell the bigger story when you put all the pieces together and you can see the full puzzle emerge. So remember, guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. If you've taken this drive before, let me know in the comments. Let me know what your favorite part was, and if you had a four-wheel drive to make it the rest of the way. Till next time, guys, bye.